Hi, I'm Sukhi Gulati GIlbert, and you're listening to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker. Today we have episode 412 for January 20th, 2025. And of course, we have an interview show for you today. We'll be talking with Sukhi from Consumer Reports. And we just did somebody from Consumer Reports, and I've got yet another interview coming up with someone else from Consumer Reports soon. It just so happens I've been doing a lot of Consumer Reports lately, which is a good thing because Consumer Reports is an amazing organization doing fantastic work. And today we're going to be talking about one of the things they've been doing that you might not be aware of, and it's a little app and a service called Permission Slip. So I will set that up here in just a minute. Before we do, real quick, a couple news items. First of all, beware of new phishing techniques, in particular if you've got an Apple iPhone. I will be talking about this more next week, but apparently these are ramping up, so I wanted to get the word out now. They are basically finding ways around Apple's limitations on making links active in suspected spam text messages. They have these weird instructions about, reply yes to this and then do blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. I'll explain next week, but just be really careful about clicking on any links you get in a text message. And if they give you really weird instructions about how to do it, that should be a red flag. And also, just across the board, everybody make sure you've updated your devices. There was a massive Patch Tuesday for Windows last week, and there's been some important Apple updates as well. So as always, keep your software updated. Also, real quick, you have 1 week left to answer the annual listener survey. And why would you want to do that? Well, two things. First of all, you can give me your feedback and I can make sure I'm giving you the best possible content. But second, if that is not enough, I'm also giving away 5 free copies of my book. These will be PDF copies that can be given to anybody around the world easily, but I'm going to give away 1 signed physical copy of my book as well. That will require that you have a U.S. shipping address. So this is completely anonymous, but if you want to enter to win a copy of the book, I will need some sort of email address that you can check so I can notify you. So go to fdsd.me/survey2025. Again, you've got 1 more week, actually a little less than that because I'm going to cut it off Sunday night. I would love to hear from you. There are a lot of questions in the survey, but you don't have to answer them all. There's just a few that are actually mandatory. So feel free to skip around if it looks too long. But this is your chance to give me some feedback on the things you like or things you would like to see me change. All right, so today we are talking with Sukhi from Consumer Reports. It was a fantastic interview. They have created an app called Permission Slip, which you can use to try, at least, to delete your data from some of the data brokers out there. And we've talked about this before recently with Ben and Tyler from Easy Opt-Outs. And this is yet another way to do that. And you can use multiple techniques. I've done that myself. Some of these are free, some of these are not free. But the Consumer Reports version of this has some interesting angles to it, which we're going to talk about today. I will be talking about the Gravy Analytics hack. That is a really big deal. That actually happened right around the time of this interview, and we make a reference to that in the show. And I will say there's a little bit of a noise issue on this one. I apologize for that. Hopefully it's not too bad. But you will hear a little scratching from time to time. I did my best to squelch that where I could. But with that little bit of a caveat, let's get to our interview with Sukhi from Consumer Reports. Sukhi Gulati GIlbert is a senior product manager at Permission Slip by Consumer Reports and a former software engineering manager and privacy researcher. Hey, welcome to the show, Sukhi.
Hi, Carrie. It's great to be here.
Consumer Reports has been around forever. I think 90 years is when I looked it up and I found out. And it was, of course, originally Consumers Union. At some point, it changed names. But it's really known for its truly independent reviews of consumer products. Like they don't accept products from anybody. They always buy it themselves. I've got super high regard for all the stuff that CR has been doing over the years. So I'm curious, what brought you to CR, and how did you come to work on this app?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Consumer Reports has such a long history of really advocating for consumers, which is one reason I'm so glad to work here, and had a journey in discovering that and discovering this opportunity. In college, I studied human-computer interaction. So I started off as a computer scientist in the space, working at Facebook right out of college, specifically working on local news and crowdsourced news as an engineer and then an engineering manager. I worked there at a pretty pivotal time, actually joining just 3 weeks before the 2016 election. And of course, that was when the discourse really started to evolve around how social media influences our perception of the world, how being informed via social media in particular is a really, really fraught space. And over my time there, I learned a lot, and in particular started to question whether such impactful technology should be governed by for-profit incentives and whether that's really the best framework to build the type of technology that at large informs us and really builds our symbolic systems or our representations of the world. I was thinking about this so much, I decided to just go think about it full-time in grad school. So that's when I went to MIT to work as a privacy researcher. I focused and got my master's in internet policy and learned so much about the history of the internet and all the different incentive structures at play. And my advisor at the time was actually working with Consumer Reports, advising the group of people who started working on permission slip. And that's when I learned about it. It just seemed to me such a great idea. As when I was studying policy, I learned very acutely how the existence of legislative rights is not enough to ensure that they make a difference in people's lives. Those rights have to be accessible. They have to be enforced. And that's really what permission slip is trying to do. Take this right to data privacy that is becoming increasingly codified in state laws, but make it easy to use. The fact that this right exists, we want to make it accessible to as many, many people as possible. So that idea was so compelling to me. And permission slip was much earlier in the journey. It was more of a soft launched beta app to just experiment with this idea, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. And I was really excited to learn about the idea through my advisor and have been fortunate enough to join the team since then as work as a product manager on evolving and maturing the product.
Well, and that's such a good point, because it's kind of like the classic, if a tree falls in a forest, but there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? If you've got rights, but you can't easily access them, do you really still have those rights, right? So yeah, and it is so complicated, and especially in the U.S., it makes it so difficult to access the few rights we do have and exercise those rights. So yes, again, that's one of the reasons I love when you guys come out with tools like these. So permission slip is a data deletion kind of thing. It's a help you at least find your information, and in some cases help you delete it. There are several data deletion services out there now because this is such a real problem. And CR actually reviewed a bunch of them. We talked about that review when it came out last fall, where they reviewed, I think, 7 or 8 different of the data deletion services. And in that thing, there's a little blurb at the very end of the report that says you explicitly did not review permission slip as part of this. So I'm curious, how is permission slip different than these other data deletion services, and why did you determine that you didn't want to compare them?
I think a great way to answer this is to start with the history of permission slip a little bit. So Consumer Reports, as mentioned, has long believed that privacy is a fundamental right and that digital privacy is just the latest iteration of that. And so when the CCPA went into effect,
California Consumer Privacy Act.
Yes, correct. The California Consumer Privacy Act, which is sort of the seminal piece of state privacy legislation in the United States. Consumer Reports did a study and found that on over 42% of sites, at least 1 out of 3 testers could not find the link to opt out of the sale of their data or have their data deleted. Shocking. And it's particularly informative because these are people who know these rights exist, are being asked to exercise them, and are looking at them on multiple sites, right, going to the privacy policy, and they're still not able to find them. So permission slip started as an experiment out of that study. The CCPA has this provision called the authorized agent provision, where you can delegate someone to be an agent on your behalf to exercise your privacy rights. And we thought, well, what if we, as a trusted organization, do this on behalf of consumers? And it actually started out as people filling out these requests by hand for the consumers on the app. We just wanted to see if this was something that people would be interested in, something that could help them. So we started as a small experimental app where all those requests were being manually processed by, trusted individuals on our team. And we were really blown away by the level of interest in it and really quickly realized, wow, we should scale this because people are interested in protecting their privacy. So the reason we're not in that report is because at the time the report was written, we actually didn't offer what we offer today. Today we offer Permission Slip Plus, which is a premium tier of the product where we have some more powerful automation, and we still actually do have humans in the loop because they can handle particularly tricky cases where companies are potentially non-compliant, or they can enable collective action, and happy to talk a little bit more about that. But we also have some strong automation to help send requests quickly at scale to over 100 data brokers. So that premium tier of the app, which we launched last October, came out well after the evaluation in the report had happened. We still do maintain the free service because our mission is to make these rights accessible. And so to the extent that we can support the cost of operating the free service, we will continue to do so, just to make some inroads into making these rights accessible. Permission Slip Plus, I would say, is still pretty different from the other things on the market. The main reason for that is that we're a nonprofit. So when you subscribe to Permission Slip Plus, that is not just going to Permission Slip, it's going to Consumer Reports, and particularly all of Consumer Reports' advocacy work. So we like to say that Permission Slip is not just fighting for your privacy, but for everyone's. We have an advocacy team. They put out a model bill recently, which I'd actually also love to link. But
is that the Delete Act?
Well, so the Delete Act is a piece of legislation in California, which will make it easy for constituents to have their data deleted from data brokers. But our advocacy team is giving feedback on the Delete Act, but also on state laws across the country, also working to get federal legislation passed and putting out model bills for what we think that federal legislation ought to look like. And we're working closely with them. So we work to not just get your privacy rights exercised, but then use your voice to amplify the broader mission that privacy rights should be stronger. So you're really part of a bigger movement there, and we try to keep you in the loop on important legislative moments and companies that are not handling your data responsibly and encourage you to send requests to them. We also cover a pretty wide range of companies. So because we're your authorized agent, that means we can send requests not just to data brokers, which we do in the Plus tab, but we can also send requests to consumer-facing companies that you know that you use and don't want your data anymore. Those are companies like, for example, recently we facilitated a lot of requests to 23andMe because there was some inclination that they might not be handling your data responsibly, and that's pretty sensitive data. So the last thing I'll say is, I alluded to, we also have an industry relations program, and this is one of my favorite parts of our work, because one of the advantages of submitting a request through Permission Slip is we can see on our end when a company is at scale not responding to requests. So if you submit a request on your own, which is still something I encourage everyone to do, even to just a few, to just see what the process is like. Yeah. And that company doesn't get back to you, there's not as much recourse you have. You can file a complaint with your state AG if you have privacy laws. But what we can do is we can see 10,000 requests have been submitted through Permission Slip and only 1,000 have been responded to. And we will file complaints with relevant state AGs or escalate with the threat of a complaint. And we are generally able to get results that way because it's not just one request, it's thousands.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. In fact, and I also remember, I can't remember if this was in your report, if I got this somewhere else, but, and this should not be surprising to anybody listening to the podcast, because we've talked about this with VPN reviews and VPN makers, is that a lot of the data brokers behind some of these are also behind some of the data deletion services. Isn't that correct? Yes. There was, unfortunately, some reports that came out that indicated that some data deletion services are actively working with data brokers, and that's really unfortunate. It undermines a lot of trust. Oh, geez. All right. So we, of course, are not doing that. Yes, that is another bonus. Yeah. You can be pretty sure Consumer Reports is not doing that to you. So where are the data brokers, getting all of our information? What types of information are we talking about? We covered this a lot, but I always like to ask different people this because I always get different answers. So what is your perspective on that? Where are we leaking data? This is a tough question because the answer really is that we are leaking data almost everywhere. It's a lot of data brokers will aggregate from public sources like government databases, property records, voter registration records, things that are out there but not easy to access until somebody
aggregates it and makes it easy to access. And I think some of that participation in public life is, of course, unavoidable. You can buy a property via an LLC or a trust, but it can be realistically difficult to keep up on all of those sources. There's also things like reward programs that you participate in every time you give an email to sign up for something, that random photo editing app you downloaded one time and used and then forgot to delete, Foursquare, that account that you have from 10 years ago when everybody was checking in everywhere.
Yeah, right.
All of these things generate a trail of data that has since been transformed and bought and sold. The FTC recently actually took action against 2 data brokers, Gravy Analytics and one other.
Which was just hacked, by the way.
Good to know. I saw the action. I didn't realize it had recently been hacked. But
like in the last day or two, literally.
Wow. They were actually geofencing sensitive areas, hospitals, churches, and then making inferences on location data, really sensitive things, right? Where you worship and who you affiliate with, and then selling that. So those, when you say what type of data is there, it could be anything from your address and your phone number. Those I think are easier to reason about, but also that you went to one Episcopalian church one time, or that you were at a mosque, or that you visited potentially, right, a certain type of healthcare clinic. It can be quite invasive, the inferences that they can create, which is why I think one of the most important things that we can do is exercise these data rights, not just for the impact of getting your data deleted, but because it's just one of the only forms of recourse we have to create a coercive pressure for these companies to be held to a higher standard and comply.
Yeah. Okay, so I've downloaded permission slip onto my phone. I open it for the first time. What do I see? What do I do? How does this app work? What information do I put in? And then once I do this, am I done? Is there interaction required after that? Like as these things come back, because I did some of this work on my own, and there was definitely some back and forth with some of these companies saying, please confirm this, or we couldn't find your records here. Come back and do something, follow up that was required. So how do I get started? Like literally, like if I'm looking at the app, what do I do? And then how much more human interaction should I expect as this process goes on?
When you download the app, the first thing that you'll see is a bunch of company names and recognizable brands. Some places like to scan your email and then suggest some of the most relevant ones to you. We're not doing that right now because it's a lot of sensitive data in your email that we don't want to proliferate or store in any way. Although maybe in the future, if we're confident we can do it in a way that is up to our standards, we will. But for now, you'll go in, you'll explore brands, and maybe that you used to eat at Taco Bell a lot, but you moved, you're not there anymore, you don't want them to have your data anymore. So you will click on Taco Bell, and we present to you a summary of their privacy policy. So the first thing we do is we try to make it easy to understand what types of data they collect on you and what types of data they might be storing on you. And if you decide, I'm probably not going to eat there again, I want all my data deleted, then you will scroll down on the details and you will choose to send a request. The first request you send, we will collect your email, your phone number, and your address. This is the minimal set of data that we've found to be effective in identifying you in the vast majority of cases. And then we will take it from there. You will sign, you'll give us that information, any secondary email addresses that you choose to share. Then you'll sign an authorization letter. And from there, we will send the request for you in most cases. We also do try to minimize back and forth. Companies do have a right to directly verify with you. So in some cases, you will then get an email from them where they're asking you to verify your identity. So in those cases, we try to alert you within the app, but it's just a good idea to keep tabs on your inbox and verify those if they come through.
So that's even if I've designated you as my CCPA agent, they can still come to me directly and bypass you, and that's still something you can't do for me as my agent.
Unfortunately, yes. So,
okay.
And that is something that we are actively working on behind the scenes because, as you can imagine, it makes it difficult to truly be an authorized agent for people. But companies have an incentive to make it not seamless and not easy to satisfy these requests. And so they do have the prerogative to directly reach out to you in addition to having delegated us as the agent. But we don't find that to happen in every case. So there are still very many companies where that won't happen, and we'll be able to take you through the whole process without you doing anything other than submitting. We find it happens more often with deletion requests than opt-out of sale requests. And opt-out of sale requests can sometimes actually be more effective because they get you on a suppression list so that if you ever show up in their database again, they know that you don't want your data sold. But sometimes for deletion requests, the verification bar is higher. Once those requests are submitted, you can check their status within the application. And that what I've described is the process also for the free version of Permission Slip. If you choose to upgrade to Permission Slip Plus, then what we'll do is you'll go through that authorization flow one time, and then we will automatically kick off requests to over 100 data brokers for you. And again, most of those will not require further intervention. If you will ask for specific additional verification on your behalf, just they want to know that we're not fraudulent, for example. And the consumer-facing companies, you will still pick, since we don't know which ones are relevant to you, and we don't want to proliferate your data to a bunch of consumer-facing companies that might not already have your data. So we sort of take your signal that you have a reason to believe they would. And for some requests, which are, again, particularly costly to fill out, for example, maybe they have a CAPTCHA involved in the form, we give you some number of those, we call them concierge requests per year, and we'll have a person fill them out for you.
Gotcha. Because I've advised my audience to use like email aliasing services and things like that, I actually own several domain names. And the way I do that for a lot of things is I just make up any address at my domains that I own and give them unique ones all the time. I'm guessing those wouldn't be the ones I'd give you. But if I do have multiple email addresses and I put them in the app, do you give all those email addresses to everybody you apply for? Or do you do some sort of checking like, wait, what do they already have? Let's not give them any more information than they already have.
Good question. So right now, the websites that we send these requests to, the data brokers, the vast majority of them are not searchable. So we can't know what they have and already have without sending the request, which is a little bit of a catch-22, unfortunately. But because they're legally required to put you on a suppression list and not use the data for anything else, and we also monitor for misuse, we think that the risk trade-off to get you out of there when they almost certainly have something on you is a good one. And so we choose to send that data. We have not yet onboarded a lot of the people search sites, because the people search sites, which are publicly searchable. And we won't be doing that until we build the technology to scan for your information first, so that we know if they already have it before we submit the request. So in the case where we can check first, we're working on doing that. And we don't send to most of those sites yet, because we're actively building that preemptive scan. We're trying to do it in a way that's really, really thoughtful, because the difficult part here is, a lot of places will just go ahead and scan and say you're not on there. What's tricky is once they're logging those searches, right? So also once you do the search, they know that you've searched for this, and they'll ask you questions during the search.
Yes.
Is it the person that lives here? Is it the person that lives there? And so actually in that, you are giving them data. And so if you give them that data and then say, hey, you're not on this database, and then never submit the opt-out of sale, then in a way you have given them data that you didn't before and you didn't submit the request. Additionally, if you take a screenshot of that data and then send it over email and say, hey, here's proof you're on this site, you have unintentionally proliferated that data further. So we're really being thoughtful and thinking through all these things before we onboard some of the more complex people search sites that can be particularly tough to opt you out of.
Yeah, so even in your own report on this, because not only did you compare these like 7 or 8 services amongst themselves, like how effective they were, I think what you did is you checked back with them after a certain amount of time and see, if it was deleted, and then how long did it stay deleted, for example, how many of the requests were successful and things like that. But even in there, you compared that to doing it yourself. When I first started on this journey last year, I said, gosh darn it, I'm going to go through this process and suck it up and do it myself. And Intel Techniques, I worked with Jason Edison on this, and they always recommend you do it yourself. And so, all right, let's do that. And it was painful. It wasn't difficult, but it was long and tedious. And I took extensive notes and I had to keep almost a journal for each site because they were all a little bit different. And you're right. As you're going through this, they're constantly prodding you to actually give them more information as you're trying to delete or find your information. It was really frustrating. And yet, your own report found that was still more effective than all the other services that you were ranking in the report. So how hard, from your perspective, maybe help the audience, why did you recommend that, or why did, maybe you didn't recommend, why? Because it is tricky. What is your recommendation, I guess, given that your own report found that it's more effective to do it yourself, but it's hard? What does that really entail? Kind of explain to the audience from your perspective what it entails, and then how permission slip is better or different, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you know how dermatologists say the best sunscreen is the one that you'll use?
Yeah.
I think the best way to opt yourself out of these data brokers and all of the companies selling your data is the one that you will actually have the time to do. Yep. So there are a lot of reasons that doing yourself might be more effective. Some companies will be more responsive to individual requests. Sometimes when you're an authorized agent, you have to fill out a different form on people's behalf. Sometimes companies have, different prioritization queues and all that good stuff. So I think it does make sense that if you're submitting a request on an individual level, there might be affordances to be more thorough or to represent your information a little bit differently, for example, based on the website, and therefore find your record in a more targeted fashion. But I think it comes down to the time it takes to do that and whether one realistically has that time to invest at the end of the day. The process works like this. First, you have to know what the sites are. So that takes a little bit of expertise. If you want to do it yourself, I recommend one place to start is data broker registries maintained by state government. So the California one is a pretty good one. Then you go to that website. Then you should go to the privacy policy. In the privacy policy, if you Control F opt out or CCPA, that should send you to the right link to exercise your data right.
Control F being find or search, yeah.
Yes, Control F being find or search. And that will give you either a form to fill out or an email address to message. Those are the easiest ones. In the harder ones, they want a record ID. Mm-hmm. And with those ones, what you'll want to do is search yourself. As you mentioned, Carrie, they'll ask a bunch of follow-up questions. Try to give fake data to that or evade them if at all possible. Mm-hmm. They can be kind of tricky, They'll frame it as they're trying to help you find the right record, but really they just want to know more about you.
I had a couple of them actually ask me to upload an ID.
Never do that.
Never do that. Yep.
They might also ask for a MAID, which is a device identifier. In that case, I encourage you to at least send an email and say, I really don't want to give you this. And can you find me by my email? You shouldn't need this. Can you confirm you absolutely need this? That kind of thing. And
by the way, I think on that one where I asked for an ID, there was no obvious way for you to not do it, except for, you canceled or whatever. And then it said, okay, fine. If you're not going to give me an ID, then you can give me this instead. But it didn't give you that option until you said no.
Often they can find you with less and they just don't want to. Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. So that's the process basically, right? You compile a list and you go down and you go through the process for every single company on that list. So I think the value of these services is, although I do, we try to obviously get as high success rates as possible, and we are consistently improving. We just launched this product in October, and so we're getting better really every week at this rate as we mature it. But I think the happy medium is find a service that resonates with you, that you feel is right for meeting your needs. If this is something you believe in, it can save a lot of time to give that a shot. And then maybe you just send individual requests to the ones that were denied, or if there's a few that aren't covered. if you don't feel that it's been comprehensive enough. But I think, I don't know, I'm a mom. I barely have time to brush my hair every day. So, even as someone who really, really cares about this, I've found our own automation to be really helpful just by the sheer nature of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did a whole 3 series of articles on this, and it was only going to be 2, and then after I did the first 2, and I started getting some feedback and talked to some other folks, I basically came down on the compromise side of, okay, if you can manage to do a few of these yourself, I still think it's worth doing just to kind of blow your mind and understand how this works and what it would be like if you did it yourself. Try LexisNexis, try Intellius, try Redaris, try a few of the big ones, and just blow your mind as to how much of your info is out there. Go through one of the deletion processes just to see how painful it is and try it, and then pay somebody to do it, like either you or Easy Opt-Outs. I really like what those guys are doing. And a couple quick plugs. You mentioned that opt-out list. Intel Techniques has got a really good list as well with all the contact information that jumps you right to the opt-out sites, which is nice. And there's another one called the Big Ass Opt-Out List or something.
Yes.
It's in the article.
The Big Ass Data Broker Opt-Out List, the bad fool, maintained by Yael Grauer, who is actually at Consumer Reports. She's brilliant.
Yes, and actually we'll be talking to her soon. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so how much of this information can I actually delete via these requests, and how long does that process take? And then I'm really curious, what's the likelihood of success of these things actually working, and how does that vary depending on where you live? Because you've talked a lot about California, for example. Am I just SOL if I live in some other state? I know there's a few other states that have similar laws, but then also some of these companies have got to be from outside the EU and the United States, so that they probably don't have any requirement to comply in the first place, right? Even if you are a California resident, for example, does that mean that some country operating out of Bermuda is going to have to comply to your request?
Yeah, so a few questions in there, all of which I think are worth addressing. And I think one of the first things you touched on is, what's the realistic expectation here of success? What can I get deleted, and what can we actually do about this problem? I think it really is important to reframe and re-baseline success, because a lot of people, I think, haven't had the chance to explore how fraught the landscape really is, in the sense that, as you mentioned, there's a lot of companies that have your data, and they have widely varying submission methods and compliance rates and all of that good stuff. So I don't think that a realistic bar of success is to sort of completely wipe yourself off the internet without a lot more effort, although I would love to see that be really easy to do one day, and I think everyone should have that right. But rather to drastically reduce your digital footprint. I mean, there are 5 to 10 key data brokers that are selling your data to political campaigns. If you get on their suppression list, then you will probably get less of those texts around election season asking for, a million times for fundraising.
Oh my God, yes. Oh, this last election was so bad.
It was so bad. And that's from data brokers selling your data to people who have an interest in campaigning to you.
In some of these cases, I remember with marketing for stuff, this was true with marketing emails. You could opt out of marketing emails, but there were 2 exceptions. One of them, there was something like companies you already had an established relationship with. There were a couple loopholes that turned out to be quite large, or like religious organizations or political organizations. I think those were actually explicitly not part of the opt-out of the junk mail list, the snail mail junk mail list.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head the exact definition of data brokers in the CCPA and other state legislation. I'm sure though that some I will say though that you can, when you have the protections, submit opt-out requests to a really wide array of companies, because it's not just data brokers that are the problem, right? There's also legitimate companies that you bought something from that are selling your data. So it's really everyone, and the opt-outs do apply. You should be able, in theory, to delete all your data or opt out of the sale from it. So are there loopholes? I am sure that there are loopholes, but if you have those rights protected, you should be able to exercise them with pretty much any company that has your data, and that's sort of the point of those digital
so sorry, I interrupted
rights.
you. So back to the previous point.
Well, no, I think TLDR, the main takeaway of the previous point is that the goal should be to reduce your digital footprint, and you can do that. It does require a bit of keeping up on it because, as you mentioned, yes, you can delete a lot of instances of your data, but it also can keep popping back up, especially because some of these sources are public, right? You can get your address off of one People search site, and then 6 months later, another one pops up that's a subsidiary of the old one that has re-aggregated all the property records, and so you need to submit another, data suppression request and all of that good stuff. So
what about the jurisdictional part?
Yes, the jurisdictional part. We monitor this, and we do see radically different compliance based on the state that you live in. So there's a set of companies that will comply regardless of where you live. And we ensure that we are, sending requests to these companies. But one thing we do that I think might be different from a few other places, but I'm not sure, honestly, is we also make a point to continue to send requests to companies that are likely going to tell you that your request is out of jurisdiction. And the reason that we continue to send requests to these companies is because it still applies pressure on them to comply. You are still flooding their queues with requests to have data deleted. You are still giving them strong signal that it's something that consumers want, and you are still having them spend time and money to tell you that they're not going to respect your privacy. I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One is if it's a consumer-facing company, you might choose to take your business elsewhere, if one company complies and another one doesn't. The second is that as state laws do pop up, we are working on a process to resubmit requests. So we haven't quite implemented yet, but something that we hope to do in the near future is, hey, we saw you sent requests last year. A privacy law now came online, like a privacy law in Delaware came online in January. So now we can look at your historical record and we can resubmit requests now that you have those privacy protections. The third thing that we can do is if there's a key legislative moment in your state where your support could be important to pass a bill, we can let that state AG know. We have 20,000 requests from constituents of your state that have gone unreplied to, so they care. So it's kind of this catch-22 where, maybe your individual fulfillment rate will look lower, but that's really not the right metric, because if you're only submitting to companies who are doing the good thing and complying with everyone, you're creating a totally perverse incentive structure where if you respect privacy more, you're going to get more requests. And if you say, no, I'm not going to bother with that, companies are so afraid of what their fulfillment rates look like that, they exclude them because they want to show that, we're totally getting 100% fulfillment rate or this, that, or the other. So we do see radically different fulfillment rates. We're actively monitoring it, but we have made the decision to continue to send those requests because I think the ecosystem effect over the long term of continuing to pressure companies who have decided to comply in only the most narrow fashion is really important if you're looking at the bigger picture.
If any of these companies do come back and say, you're outside California, you don't have to comply, so no. If that happens, at that point, if you're not in a state or a country that has privacy laws, are you basically just done at that point? Is there just nothing left to do?
So I have to think more about the outside of U.S. thing because our recourse is so much less, right, when they're outside of the U.S. As
does actually permission slip work outside the U.S.? Because some of the other data deletions ones don't work outside the U.S. at all. They're U.S. based.
We don't. We are U.S. based.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we are U.S. based. And yeah, so for your second question of what can you do if they say that they're out of jurisdiction and you don't have privacy rights, the first thing I'll say is it's still worth submitting the request because a lot of times they will still comply.
Right.
In the case that they don't, it's true that your legal recourse is really limited, which is why it's really important to continue to advocate for a federal privacy law. What you can do is you can continuously send the requests, you can advocate with your representatives, and you can email that company and express your displeasure. And these are all things that we do behind the scenes. But good old fashioned advocacy, that's really what you've got to do.
Yeah, and I totally love the idea of just annoying them anyway. I mean, just just let them know, like, I don't like this. And if enough people do that, maybe they'll get the hint.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right. So as we've already talked about, most of the data brokers and people search sites get their information from these public sources, which are not going away. I mean, these tax records, voter registration rolls, various legal things that are online that used to be at your county clerk's office where you had to go down and, during business hours and ask somebody behind the counter to make a copy of something for you. And now it's all on the internet, which these guys are scraping like crazy. Is there any way to suppress or remove these original sources that these guys are getting from? How common is it for the DMV or the local Secretary of State's office or whatever to say, we're not going to make your records publicly available? They've got to be available on some level, I know, because that's why they're public records. But is there some way for them to limit or restrict who can have access to some of those public records so that we're not, go back to the original source on these things?
So a lot of the full access to this data is restricted. So a lot of law enforcement database type things, those are restricted. So that's good. Things like property records in some counties, divorce records. The landscape is just real, and marriage licenses, that kind of thing.
Yep.
The landscape for how to access it is really fractured. So there are still some counties where you still go in person to the clerk's office to request a copy, or you have to specifically ask for somebody. But there are some who have made a move to make it more publicly searchable. I think the answer, unfortunately, is that there's not one clear answer. It is very difficult with government records to totally remove a record of yourself from public life. What
about freezing your credit? That's a common thing in the security sphere that we recommend that people do, because it's one of the best ways to prevent identity theft. But these same people, Experian and Equifax and TransUnion and Innovis and some of these other ones, are also the data brokers. These are also same people with risk management solutions, where they're selling to insurance companies and they're selling your data to other people too. If you freeze your credit, does that have any impact on them selling your data? And if not, is there a parallel request, a data freeze or something you could do with these same companies that's free and easy?
Well, you should be submitting the same data rights request to Experian and TransUnion and Equifax as well. So freeze.
So the mechanism is the same mechanism we've already been talking about.
Yeah, the mechanism is the same mechanism.
And a credit freeze does not do that, to be clear.
No.
They're unrelated.
Yeah, a credit freeze does not change what they have the right to do with your data. A credit freeze changes the ability for third parties or unauthorized parties to access your data, and so can reduce the risk that you're subject to credit card theft or identity fraud. But it does not stop these companies themselves from selling your data or doing what they see fit with your data. So you should, I was just looking at Equifax the other day, actually, and it's a form for them, I think, but you should go to their privacy policy and opt out of the sale of your data from your financial institutions especially.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because unlike all the other companies, we are not direct customers of these people. I didn't sign up to be an Equifax customer, and yet they've got so much data on me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's in the fine print of all the credit cards I've ever signed up for. Somewhere buried in there is you agree to share this information with credit bureaus, and yeah.
I agree. It's really frustrating how obscure it is, and I think that's why I like the language of reducing your digital footprint as opposed to eliminating it or deleting all your data, because I think there's a lot of anxiety in this space and, fear-based marketing and ways to just make it feel hopeless and intractable. And so I think to just take a step back and just recognize it's the landscape. It's not you, and it's happening to everyone. And so just taking whatever steps you can and whatever feels approachable to reduce your footprint, that's better than doing nothing.
Well, and this brings up one of my hugest pet peeves, and I recently talked about this somewhere else. I can't remember where, but you agree to terms of service is the biggest lie on the internet, right? It's because no one ever reads the terms of service, and there's so many dark patterns in the way they get you to do this, and yet it's all somehow on you. Like, oh, we've always given you the means to opt out, and you just for some reason haven't done it. You've had the power all along. I also liken it to Dorothy with the slippers. You could have gone home any time. It's like, really, why didn't you tell me at the start of the movie? Anyway. they make it hard, and this whole notice and consent model is just a farce. It's just, we're not informed consumers. We don't really know what's going on. They make it hard to know what's going on. Even if you read the privacy policies, they're vague. There's filled with legalese and loopholes and vague terms that you can interpret multiple ways. And even if you had read these privacy policies, which you don't have time to, by the way, you would spend all your life doing it if you tried to read every privacy policy in terms of service for everything that you've ever used. It just drives me nuts that we've decided that is the method we were going to do with privacy in this country.
Yes, I could not agree more that, granular consent is good in theory, but in practice is just a way to victim blame a little bit. You agreed to this. Mm-hmm. So in the human computer interaction community, we talk a lot about, the failed cookie experiment, how every site you go to asks you to accept or reject cookies. And it's in theory supposed to be an exercise in giving you control over your data. But in practice, now you just have another pop-up that you always click accept to.
Right. And then that is probably the biggest dark pattern of them all, is just fatigue. Request fatigue. I mean, people they want to get to using the product. They want to get to using the web page. And all these things are popping up on their way. It's like, what can I click right now to make this go away? Right. And of course, it's the one that they want you to click.
Privacy is a hygiene feature, right? You're not going to the website in order to exercise your right to privacy. You're going to do something. And so sometimes you have to sell your soul in order to do it. And that doesn't feel great. All
right. So I've heard some privacy experts, some of the more snarky ones maybe, recommend poisoning the well, so to speak, like creating deliberately confusing information to either, on one hand, prevent the data brokers from correlating your records across various websites. Like, for example, if you gave them all different email addresses when you sign up for things, that makes it difficult. That's the reason. One of the reasons they ask for email for all these signs now instead of making up a username is more than likely you've got one or two emails, and so therefore becomes very easy for you to correlate that user with another user on two different sites because they have the same email address, right? It's a unique ID, globally unique ID. So, you could create some kind of chaff or make it difficult for them by signing up for all these services with different emails. But I've also heard some of them say that if you seed misinformation on some of these sites, let's say you're signing up for a Kroger loyalty card, which you don't care if they have your right birth date or whatever. So if you start giving false information, then that also muddies the waters. And I've had some people say that this is a worthwhile thing to do. I don't know. What's your take on any of those ideas?
I'm pro. I think if it doesn't add too much time to your day, why not do it? I mean, you don't get too much out of them having your data except for maybe slightly more effective marketing. So it can't hurt for you to be putting in fake data. I think it's a little bit unlikely for enough people to do it at scale in order to make it not lucrative to collect data, unfortunately. Oh, sure. So, of course, all these things are better the more people that do them, but it can't hurt. I also am a huge fan of, sign in with Apple or using temporary emails. I think Firefox has a relay. There's also a few temporary email services whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Simple Login's another popular one, yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes there's a lot of them, actually, there's a lot. So I think deliberately faking the data is a fun one. And if you just get into the habit of logging in with some of these privacy relays, then the company is able to correspond with you. Like, you want the coupons, let's say, but you don't want to contribute to them having this big database on you. Those relay emails and temporary emails, then they can't build a profile on you because there's no way for that to be linked across databases. So I think that can be effective and is also something that can just become a habit that you sign in with one of those.
All right. So a couple more questions before we go. Let's get to some practical stuff. I always like to try to give people some action items and things they can actually do. So what else can we do to reduce our data footprint and limit the amount of information that the brokers have access or that they can share? Yes.
So I am pro reviewing your social media accounts if possible, deleting unused ones, deleting unused apps off your phone. So of course doing that a whole big audit and just make sure that you're, deleting accounts. Also am pro using one of these services or yourself sending as many object requests as you can to the places that have your data. If you're in California, then coming down the pipe is the Delete Act, which should make it really easy to do it with a lot of data brokers for free as well. So that will be a good one. We talked about the relay email, so I'm a fan of those as well because the email is just such a strong identifier for linking you across these different databases and all that good stuff. I'm also a fan of some basic security tips. So, for example, if you're on vacation, posting photos of where you are when you're back, not while you're there, that's not really data privacy as much as it is security. But I think just little things like that, where the more that you're posting information about your daily life on the internet, being cognizant of where and when you're doing it, all those things I think add up.
All right. So what are the future plans does Consumer Reports have in the privacy and security space? They got any other cool apps are coming? Any big features coming to permission slip? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, so one thing to say is that Permission Slip Plus is always improving. So we have so much stuff coming down the pipe that I'm excited to share. And first, a huge shout out to anyone listening to this who has already supported us by subscribing to Permission Slip Plus. You're an early adopter, and I can promise you that things are going to get even better. So that's exciting. But as I mentioned, we're hoping to do a lot of things like start resubmitting requests for people who have had privacy laws come online. And we're also working with our advocacy and campaigns team so that we'll be actually surfacing relevant petitions to people within the app. So, for example, if we find that a company is potentially misusing data, we'll let you know about that for you to send a request to them. Or if we find that there's a particularly key moment in your state, we'll surface a petition for you to sign. So there's going to be a lot more two-way interaction, advocacy, improvement of the product coming down. The second thing is we haven't gotten to talk as much about Consumer Reports broader testing. I will say that we are always testing the privacy and security of connected products and always improving our ability to do so. We test hundreds of products for privacy and security, and specifically the data privacy angle. One small example is we built a whole lab brand new to test robotic vacuums separate from upright vacuums with a heat map to show which areas of the room they go to. And when we're assessing how good these robot vacuums are at getting in the corner of your couch, we're also actually looking at the packets of information they're sending back to the server to map the room and understanding if that's something you'd be comfortable with. And we have found that some robot vacuums are taking unencrypted images of your home and sending them back, which is something that you probably don't want happening and would probably never even think about when you're assessing robot vacuums. With the recent news of, the considered ban on TP-Link routers, for example, we actually gave that router a not so great score on data privacy. So you can see that we're sort of constantly looking for this, and have some really talented testers in that department who are on the computer looking at what data is being transmitted. So we really believe you have a right to know who's collecting information about you and what's being done with it. So permission slip operates on the end, of course, that it's already happened. How do we opt out of sale and get it deleted? And on the product side of things, we're hoping to keep you informed before you buy something as to whether that thing that you're bringing into your very intimate space of your home is a risk or not.
Well, this must have added a whole new dimension to all of your tests, because you've tested appliances and things, toasters and refrigerators, and none of those things used to be connected to the internet. And now a lot of them are, right? So this has got to be a whole new dimension to all the testing you've already done for decades.
Yeah, I'm definitely proud to say that it's new in the span of the whole appliance life cycle, but that I do feel like the organization has been really quickly adapting to it. And so at this point, we have expertise and have connected with government and regulators to already proactively address like multiple security flaws that we've found. So new dimension, but not as new to us as you would think, because of the great experts we have over in testing who were able to adapt as soon as connected devices started coming on the market.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sukhi, for coming on the show. That was very, very informative. And keep doing what you're doing. This is wonderful stuff. I can't wait to see it get better. I guess real quick, what is the cost of the pro version of the tool?
We offer Permission Slip Plus at $59.99 a year, which works out to $5.99 or so a month. We do also offer a monthly subscription, which is at $19.99 a month.
And is this, in your experience, is this something I'm going to be doing for life until we get privacy laws? Because these things keep coming back. I mean, how long do I need to subscribe to make a good dent?
Yeah, we definitely recommend the annual subscription, which is part of the difference in pricing. We just think it's the best experience because it takes minimally 45 days. That's the legal compliance window for these requests. So you won't even start hearing back for a couple weeks. And then we like to follow up with ones you haven't heard back from and that kind of thing. So there should be a good dent that you can make on your digital footprint in a year of the subscription. And until we have privacy laws, there is some benefit to continuously sending requests because the lists of data brokers change and your data can pop back up and all that good stuff. But of course, you can always just do it once every few years, a sweep, or however you choose to do it.
All right. Well, that's great. Thanks so much, Sukhi. And thanks to you for doing what you're doing. This is wonderful stuff.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
It was really good to talk to Sukhi, and I'm so happy to see Consumer Reports really taking privacy seriously. I've been a Consumer Reports subscriber for literally decades. They are truly independent. They're one of the last few remaining places that are fiercely independent about doing their consumer reviews, and they really do a good job. When they dig into stuff, they are not screwing around. And I'm so happy to see that they are taking the time to investigate the privacy and security of the products that they recommend, because that has become so important now, especially now that everything is getting connected to the internet. And then they have these other wonderful projects like Permission Slip and their security planner. There's a lot of great resources at Consumer Reports. And I love supporting these guys, and hopefully you can too. And by supporting them, by signing up for things like Permission Slip, you're helping them to do more good work. So see the show notes. I've got links to the Permission Slip app in there. Of course, if you just search on Consumer Reports Permission Slip, it'll take you right there. Remember, they do have a free version you can try out. So if you want to, at least start with that. And then if you decide you like that, you can bump up to the pro version. I've already used easy opt-outs, and I've already done some of this myself, but I think I'm going to give it a shot. Maybe sign up for 1 year and see how that goes. And by the way, I've been updating my series of articles on OSINT for data deletion with some of this new information. There's a link to those articles in the show notes as well. If you want to try this yourself, there's a lot of information in those articles about how to do that. And then in summary, I basically kind of back up and say, okay, yeah, this is really hard to do by yourself. If you want to pay someone else to do it, here are my recommendations. But I will just say, again, I think it's worth trying this on your own just to see what this is like, see what information is out there, see how hard this actually is to do, to delete your data. So they're being forced to do this. They don't like to do it, so they make it as painful as possible. But I still think it's instructive to understand how it works. I did find the California Registry of Data Brokers. I put a link in the show notes for that. Vermont has one as well, but it seems to be hidden. I've tried hard to find it. One set of instructions I found said you have to sign up for an account, and then you have to go find the list and find the special link to bulk download it. I did sign up for an account and still didn't find it. So either it's changed or it's just really hard to find. I actually sent a note off to the Secretary of State's office or wherever there was the office that handles this, because I'm curious to know how to get that list. They should make it easier. So if I hear back from them and have something useful, I'll pass that on. Sukhi did mention using sign in with Apple, which is great, by the way, especially if you use their hide my email feature. To get that, I think you have to have at least one Apple plan, and I think their first plan starts at 99 cents a month, which is cheap. But note that is very, very different than signing in with Google or signing in with Facebook or with any other similar services from advertising companies. They may look the same, the buttons look the same, they sound the same, but they are totally different. Signing in with Apple is fine. Signing in with Google and Facebook is not. However, personally, since I'm using a password manager and, services like Simple Login and things to create new email addresses for a lot of these things, I prefer just to create accounts and not use a third party. It just kind of muddies things up. But if you're going to use one, you sign in with Apple. We also talked about the California Delete Act. That is slowly coming online. There's steps to that process. I looked at it online. It appears that come January 1st of 2026 is when California residents will then be able to, with a single request all your data to be deleted. And I'm honestly hoping that, like we've already seen, that some data brokers will even honor these requests from non-California residents. We shall see. Regardless, I'm guessing the Consumer Reports Permission Slip app will make this request on your behalf when the time comes. All right, so patrons will get some bonus content, some bonus Q&A with Sukhi. On Thursday, as usual, we talk a little bit about her origin story. She actually spent time at Facebook, and so we also get into how that might have impacted her privacy career and talk about Facebook's recent moves to eliminate fact-checking and honestly the problems with trying to do fact-checking at any kind of scale. That is not an easy problem. We talk a bit about Section 230 reforms, and we even talk a little bit about her master's thesis, which is on the challenges of putting privacy laws into practice. So again, as usual, patrons will get that bonus content on Thursday. Again, the listener survey ends on Sunday. Go to fdsd.me/survey2025. And if you'd like, you can register for a chance to win a free copy of my book. We've got lots of interviews in the pipeline. I'm working up on something like at least 10 different interviews right now. One that I actually just recorded was an interview with the CTO from Anonymity Labs, the makers of the MySudo app, and their associated aliasing services. We'll talk about email aliases and virtual personas and all sorts of other ways you can compartmentalize your personal data online. And that will be coming out soon, so stay tuned. But I've got a whole lot of other ones in the pipeline. So if you have not already, subscribe, because there's a lot of great stuff coming. All right, that's going to do it for this week. Take care, everybody. We'll have news as usual next week. Lots to catch you up on. And until then, as always, stay safe out there and don't get caught with your garbage.